Yo, what is up everyone? Today we're going to talk about post-rowing workout stretches. So what should you be doing after a rowing workout? The best thing we can do is break down the muscle groups that are used during rowing and then have a stretch to address each of those. So starting with some of our big muscles, our legs are the biggest muscles used while rowing. So the number one stretch in my opinion that you should start off with is a seated straight leg hamstring stretch. Now, reaching up to the sky, reaching forward towards the toes. If you can't grab the toes, you can grab down towards the ankles, but you want to feel a nice stretch down here in the bottom half of your legs. Now, why is this so important? It mainly has to do with the fact that your hamstrings, they're not just legs, they attach into past the hip joint. So what that means is if you can imagine a tight hamstring, like a tight rubber band, if your hamstrings are tight, they pull on your hips, they actually tug your hip girdle underneath you. And so you can imagine if you're sitting all day long and you've got, tight hamstrings that are pulling your hips underneath you, this can create a lot of lower back pain. So if you suffer from lower back pain, this is one of the best stretches to help fix your back pain. And the idea here, hold it for about 20 seconds or so. It's one of my least favorite stretches. It's really uncomfortable, but you just want to stick it for that duration. Then once that's done, you can repeat that multiple times or you can just do it once, but make sure you get that stretch in. Now, the main muscle work during rowing is the quads. So stretching out the quads, I like to stay seated on the ground. That way you can, play around with your phone or whatever, but taking one foot, bringing it behind you, keeping it nice and close to you as well, leaning back, keeping this knee on the ground. If your knee lifts up, well, you're not really stretching the quads anymore. So keep that knee down, leg close, and then lean back for a little extra stretch. You should have no problem feeling that, especially after a hard rowing workout. So just like this, you'd hold that for 20 seconds on one side and 20 seconds on the other. Now, the last part of sort of our legs that we want to think about stretching out are the hip flexors. Okay, so rowing, like cycling, is a sitting sport. It's the most work you'll ever do while sitting on your butt. But while we're sitting, we're constantly sitting in this hip flexed position. So if you're doing this while rowing and then you go to your job and you sit at your desk, the hip flexor muscles are just staying tight the whole day. So we want to make sure that we stretch those out. So we can do that by going into a bit of a lunge stance here. So one foot planted on the ground, your back leg, this is the side we're going to stretch. You want to take this leg and make it as straight as you can. So stick your foot back, almost like you're doing the splits on one leg. Bring that foot back, and then from here you want to press your hips, trying to go with this hip, down diagonally towards the ground, and you're going to feel it. It's a different stretch than like the hamstring stretch. It just feels a little bit more odd. But this is how we stretch out the hip flexor. Be gentle, okay? Don't try to throw yourself into this. Just nice and gentle, try to sit up your chest as tall as you can. You'll have no problem feeling that across the hip joint. You do 20 seconds on one side, gently switch, then you do 20 seconds on the other. So that pretty much covers our lower half of the body. Now, our next biggest muscles that we use when rowing is we use our back. Now, should you stretch out your back muscles? That's an interesting question because when we use our back muscles and they get tight, that essentially helps to actually pull our posture up to be a little straighter, because most of our life we spend typing at a desk, driving a car, everything with our arms kind of out in front of us. Even when you're rowing, arms out in front. But when we row, when we do pulling exercises that strengthen our back, that actually helps to correct our posture, keep us standing a little taller. So I don't necessarily stretch my back after rowing. Now, if your back is really, really tight, if it's really hurting, what you can do, take your hands, fold them, clasp them over each other, bring them out in front, and then try to round your shoulders and bring them together. You're going to feel a nice little tug in your back. Sometimes this is easier to do while standing, so that's definitely an option, but for the most part, I wouldn't worry too much about stretching out your back muscles. That's actually just going to help keep your posture in check from using those compared to what we do with our posture for the most part, which is shoulders forward, chest activated. Now the last thing that we use in rowing, we use our arms. So what are some arm stretches? I'd say with rowing, a big issue that some people have is finger tendonitis and arm tendonitis, because when you're rowing, we're not necessarily having a death grip on the handle, but even letting the handle stay in your fingertips, you've got those fingers, you've got those wrist flexors, you've got it all working each stroke that you take. And if you're doing a lot of volume exercise, you want to keep those finger flexors, those wrist flexors nice and relaxed. So how can we stretch that out? You take one arm, you want to extend it out all the way, fingers extended as well, and you're just going to pull the fingers back. Pull them back just like this, and you're going to feel those fingers stretch out, and you're going to feel your wrist stretch out all through your forearm, all the way into the medial elbow. So you can just hold that stretch just like before. 20 seconds on one arm, 20 seconds on the other. This is something that you don't really want to neglect, because like I said, if you're doing high volume rowing training, eventually it's going to catch up to your little finger muscles. So make sure we keep those stretch out as well. For the most part, those are the key stretches that you want to do after a rowing workout. What I tend to do is go through each of those one at a time and then repeat. Start back with the hamstring stretch, the quad stretch, the hip flexors, and then the forearm stretch. Sometimes the back stretch if you're sore. Okay, so I hope that helps you out. I hope that gives you a bit more of a general idea of how to approach stretching after a rowing workout. If you've got more questions for me, leave them down below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.